think recall is good. I think this recall action will fail.
I'm not very comfortable with it, but I feel like I'm a very hardworking MLA.
This is clearly a case of a left-wing activist group, Alberta Resistance, that is using recall, that is weaponizing it to force a general election.
A sampling there of reaction this week from MLAs included on a list of 14 now facing citizen-initiated recall petitions, almost a third of the UCP caucus. And while the petitions are prompting plenty of discussion and debate, the governing party argues the spirit of the legislation is being misused. Joining us now to pick up the discussion, Drew Westwater, an elections management consultant and former Deputy Chief Electoral Officer with Elections Alberta. Mr. Westwater, sir, good to see you again.
Good to be here, Michael. Good to see you again.
All right, but let's maybe start on statements from the UCP caucus that recalls are intended to address breaches of trust, serious misconduct, or a sustained failure to represent constituents. Is that what Elections Alberta would be looking for in considering approval of petition applications? What would that approval process look like?
Well, when the recall petitions are submitted to the CEO for consideration for approval to go forward, they look at the statement of the applicant, who has to be an elector in the electoral division, who give the reasons in 100 words or less of why they feel a recall is necessary for that MLA. The reasons are not stipulated in the legislation in terms of what the reasons can be for that recall. Generally, it's what the public feel how the MLA is performing in representing their constituents in the riding, and whether they feel it's being moved forward on a consistent basis, and they're happy with them or not. Clearly, with the 14 recall petitions that are currently with the petitioners for signatures, they've all stated their reasons for why they're unhappy with their MLA, and they feel that they should be recalled. And there's nothing in the legislation that would prevent those reasons from going forward for consideration by the electors in their electoral divisions.
That reference by Minister Nally, we heard a moment ago, to weaponizing recall as a means of forcing a general election. Are there circumstances that would, in fact, constitute that? Well,
the present government has a majority. There are currently 14 recall petitions that are going forward for consideration of signatures. If approved and all 14 were successful, then 14 MLAs with the ruling party, the UCPs, would be removed from office, and then there would be a recall vote. If that was approved and positive, then there'd be by-elections in those electoral divisions. So that could affect the majority status of the incumbent government, obviously.
Maybe going back to how the legislation is set up, what degree of recourse does the government have in fighting these petitions, or is it just a matter of the caucus defending itself?
Well, the caucus and the government have no role now in the petitions process. There is a process in place. It's a stringent process. Obviously, we had elections not long ago in May of 2023, which elected these representatives and were voted in by their constituents. To overturn that with a recall petition, it requires a significant approval by 60% of the electors who voted, or of the number of voters who voted at the last election, to agree that we elected them, we're not happy with their performance, they're not adequately representing us in the legislature, and we feel that they should be recalled. So that's significant in its own. That process is not easy. Of the 14 that are there, the maximum number of signatures required on one of them is 16,000. The minimum required is 9,000 votes of electors who are qualified electors in the electoral division, who have lived in the electoral division for at least 3 months prior to the petition going around. And they must all sign it in front of a canvasser witness to have that approved. So that's a significant exercise on behalf of the canvassers. So they have a period of 90 days to get all those signatures that they require, in 16,000 signatures in a period of 90 days in November, December, January is not an easy process. So that's something that has to go through a rigorous process with approved, authorized canvassers that have been authorized by the Chief Electoral Officer after they've been submitted by the petitioner initially. So it is a significant process, and for it to be successful, the majority of electors in that electoral division who voted at the last election would have to agree that it's time to recall that member.
Okay, 14 recall petitions to this point. More could be coming. And that is on top of citizen-led referendum petitions. What kind of workload could this ultimately represent for Elections Alberta staff?
This is quite significant because it is unprecedented in the past. This is fairly recent legislation. Both the citizen initiative legislation and the recall petition legislation were only adopted several years ago by Mr. Previous Premier. The existing citizens initiative that was approved and is now with its CEO for verification required 293,000 signatures. And those have to be verified by the Chief Electoral Officer and his team of staff before December 27th of this year. There's also a second recall petition that's underway and ongoing. We won't hear about that until February of next year. So they already have a team of election staff on a temporary basis hired to review the Citizens Initiative. And now the CEO will have to recruit, hire, and train additional staff on a temporary basis, much as they do for a by-election or a general election, to review the petitions, make sure that there's enough signatures on there to make it legal, to make it acceptable. And they have to be at least 16,006 on one of them. And once they've counted those and made sure there's that number on the petition, then they have to verify the information on it. Because each person that signs the petition has to put their name, their resident address, their contact information, and sign it. And that has to be done on a signature sheet that is witnessed by a canvasser. And each individual signature sheet with maybe 25 names on it must be witnessed by a canvasser that they've observed those electors signing those petitions. So that's a lengthy process for each individual petition. And if with 14 of them, if they're successful and they get enough signatures and they all come in January or February, you can imagine the workload on the CEO's office. Because they only have 21 days once they receive that petition back from the petitioner, if they get all those signatures on it, to verify that it's legal, it's valid, and it should go forward. To put this in some sort of perspective, just a comparison, Elections BC has had similar legislation for a decade or more. And over that period of time, they've had 30 recall petitions approved by the CEO to go forward for signature. Of the 30 in the 10 years that's been in effect, only 6 actually obtained the required number of signatures and were submitted to the CEO for approval. Of the 6 that were submitted to the CEO for approval, only one of them had an appropriate number of signatures and information on it to go forward. And fortunately, that didn't have to go to a vote because the MLA resigned as a result of that. However, that's how difficult it is to get these approved and go forward, but that's the legislative process. Right. It is lengthy and protracted, but that's an important initiative. And it costs money too. So we'll have to wait and see. Elections Alberta, we believe they go back before the legislative committee to ask for some more dollars. We'll see what happens with that. Mr. Westwater, always appreciate your perspective on this. Thank you kindly, sir. Good to see you. Thank you, Michael. Pleasure talking to you.
Drew Westwater is an elections management consultant and former Deputy Chief Electoral Officer with Elections Alberta.